Corner kicks are always greeted with a thunderous roar. They bring hope, however hopeless they actually prove to be. Statistically, corners are football's least effective set piece and are in a worrying state of decline. Since the year 2000, across Europe's Big Five leagues, they've led to a goal just 3.3% of the time. 4 in 10 corners don't clear the first man. 16% result in an attempt on goal, just 7% end up on target, and perhaps most damningly, only 1 in every 100 leads directly to a goal. So, arguably the biggest casualty of the Premier League era is the corner. It was a potent threat in England's old Division 1. Beefy centre-backs like Manchester United's Steve Bruce would charge forward, providing a regular threat to goal. Since the post-war era until the inception of the Premier League in 1992, corners created goals 6.5% of the time. So why is that number more than halved? Well, the simplest theory is defenders have become more astute, especially since the advent of video technology. They know what's coming and can practice resisting it in training. Teams also commit less players forward to prevent being hit on the counter-attack. This is a slightly irrational fear since only 7 of the Premier League's 56 fast break goals came from corners last season. Nonetheless, whereas Arsenal's Invincibles averaged almost 6 attackers inside the box per corner, by the time Arsene Wenger left in 2018, that number had dropped to under 5. But the problem runs deeper than just savvier defenders or less cavalier attackers. It can also be pinned on the irrational rise of the outswinging corner. Of the 120 goals scored from corners in the Premier League last season, 48 came from outswingers, yet they accounted for 62% of the 3,911 corners taken. And this is statistically mirrored in Spain, Germany, Italy, and France. Outswinging corners have less pace and more velocity, providing defenders with extra time to deal with the danger. Even if the attacker wins the ball, they tend to be further from goal, and it's tougher with a higher and often lofted ball flight to generate power. Now there are ways to combat this, like longer run-ups from outside the box or heading the ball firmly into the ground first, but these two trends have faded from fashion. In-swinging corners have their own issues. They come with greater risk but much bigger rewards. The ideal delivery is to whip the ball in at a lower inviting angle just past the penalty spot, leaving on-rushing goalkeepers in limbo. But in-swingers have no margin for error. Almost 55% failed to clear the first man in the Premier League last season. Some of the league's biggest teams appear to have also forgotten the optimal delivery zone, instead aiming for the spot between the penalty spot and the 6-yard area. To be effective here, a drilled cross is usually required, and that's far simpler to execute in open play from more beneficial angles and a less congested box. On paper, Manchester United, Tottenham and West Ham were the most wasteful last season. In fact, the trio managed just 4 goals collectively using this tactic. Tottenham's Christian Eriksen was the biggest individual offender. 66% of the Danes' corners were cleared at the near post, and his crossing accuracy was a miserable 14.4%. The top teams at in-swingers in 2017-18 were Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea and Bournemouth. They not only scored 19 goals between them, but saw over 10% of in-swingers lead to a shot on target. Manchester City boss Pep Guardiola has always favoured the in-swinger. They accounted for 52% of his corners at Bayern Munich and 55% of those during his Barcelona stint, thus bucking the trend and leading to 41 goals in the process. Under Pep, City's return of 8 goals from 284 corners last season was also much improved. Before he joined, City had the 4th worst return from corners, managing a goal every 81 compared to every 35.5 now. And Guardiola is also an advocate for the much maligned short corner. Since 2000, it has led to more goals, chances and shots on target than any other type of delivery. Short corners, especially when taken quickly, offer better angles for both out and in swingers. They have a higher success of beating the first man and give attackers time to make unpredictable and quick movements, forcing defenders to react more quickly. But ultimately, the success of any type of corner is determined by the quality of delivery. Bizarrely, in the modern game, a number of top clubs don't do their corner takers any favours, providing them with a slender run-up zone. For instance, the touchline at Old Trafford is on a slope, while Tottenham's new £1 billion stadium has just 1 foot of turf available before a steep decline towards the advertising boards. The perfect corner can be assessed on both the area the ball was placed and, regardless of delivery, whether the end result led to a meaningful chance or goal. Using this admittedly imperfect and subjective criterion, Pep Guardiola argues the best corner taker in the Premier League is James Ward-Prowse. But the Southampton midfielder's numbers are actually quite uninspiring, with just 8 assists from 247 corners, although his crossing accuracy is a respectable 28%. Based on players with over 150 Premier League appearances, the most valuable Premier League corner takers are Cristiano Ronaldo, Cesc Fabregas, Ryan Giggs, and Chris Brunt. And part of this quartet's success is varied ball placement. Football's millennium fad is to put the ball as close to the outside of the corner arc as possible. This allows for the longest possible run-up, and the white line also provides a point of reference for impact, but it can lead to predictable deliveries. This still works fine for in-swingers, but out-swingers actually have slightly more success when the ball is placed nearer to the flag. So the key to taking better corners: use in-swingers, move the ball placement back and commit an extra player to the box. As for those vilified short corners, they'll probably continue to get bad press, but as statistical analysis improves and becomes better accepted, affording defences an advantage in preparation, they might just be the corner's best hope of staying relevant.